grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm extremely proud of my hometown. That wasn't always the case, though. As a teenager, I was eager to leave, thinking there was more to experience. During my Miss Michigan USA pageant interview, Alan Thicke asked me where I would take someone to showcase Michigan. Ashamedly, my answer focused only on Detroit and what it's known for, cars and music. Michigan has so much diversity and natural beauty, home to people from all walks of life, from the sleeping bear dunes to dynamic cities. Its vibrant, multicultural environment with adventure and serenity just didn't come to mind. I didn't realize what I had until I studied abroad. An experience my next guest explains very well. It's time to go on a journey. This is Living It Up with Lanice. Studying abroad in college opens your eyes to different cultures, languages, and perspectives. It also taught me the importance of home and belonging. In Ireland, my college mate and I were yelled at by two men. Confused, my friend asked, "What did they say?" And the other replied, "Go back to where you came from." Before he could finish, I shouted, "I'm an American." The pride I felt in that moment was immense. I was instantly reminded of my community in Michigan, a place I once couldn't wait to leave, but a state that taught me how to love, work hard, and know myself. Travel opens your eyes, and Lacey Beasley had the opportunity to start traveling when she was just a toddler. She's a reporter at Fox 10 News in Mobile and recently visited Singapore and Indonesia. Lacey, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you on.
I'm so excited. I listened to 3 of your episodes yesterday. I'm so excited.
The Newsroom certainly missed you while you were away. I can't wait to hear all about your travels. Thank you for sharing this experience. Before we get into where you went and why, take this opportunity to introduce yourself.
Yes, so I am a news reporter at Fox 10. I have been there for 2.5 years. It is my first job after college, my first corporate full-time job, and I've been loving it. I grew up in Birmingham, and I grew up in a bilingual, multicultural home. My mom is Chinese and my dad is American. So I grew up with lots of Chinese influence, obviously lots of American influence in Birmingham. And so having both of those influences has really grown my heart for other cultures and really grown my heart for people of different languages and people of different nations, and especially Asian people. I am half Asian, and so I just really have a heart for Asian people and getting to know them and being immersed in the culture. And it's become a huge part of what I love to do, is just meeting people. That's obviously overlapped into my job, since I meet new people every single day, getting stories, out interviewing people, but also just my innate personality. I just love meeting people.
Did you always know you wanted to be a reporter or journalist?
Absolutely. Yes. I remember sitting freshman year orientation in college, and I knew I wanted to do something with communications. I just didn't know exactly what that meant. So I'm sitting in almost like a stadium-like classroom, and there's a lot of other people in the room, and they're going through all the different majors in communications. And the very last one was news media, and it just lit up my face. I just knew it. I was like, this looks so fun. It's not a desk job. I am out in the field every single day. I'm meeting people every single day. And honestly, I was 18 years old at the time, and being on TV sounded really cool. So that really attracted me to it. But I knew. I started off news media my freshman year, and I never changed my major. I knew it from the beginning. I was like, this is what I want to do.
So you recently went from the newsroom on what I would describe as a spiritual journey, tapping into your love for different cultures and communication. You went to Singapore and Indonesia. How did that come about?
So a group of friends of mine, they were organizing a trip from my church, and the trip was 2 days in Singapore and then 6 days in Indonesia. And I have grown up going to China my whole life, though I've never been to any other part of Asia. So immediately I'm drawn to it. And I think because I grew up traveling, I was not daunted by the long flight. I was not daunted by the traveling. My goal was I just want to get out of the American bubble almost and go and just experience a new culture. So that came about probably in about February or March. And it's a big trip. It was in total, trip with my friends was 8 days, 9 days. And then the last half of my trip, I connected over to Shanghai and I saw my family for the first time in 4 years. I've not been able to see them since before COVID. So it was a hefty trip. It was 11 days off of work, on top of it being a big financial burden almost. So I prayed about it for a while. I was like, God, if I'm meant to go, you're gonna make it happen. And God provided financially with me being able to pay for the trip, as well as, I talked to our managers about it, and they know it was a long trip, and they approved my time off for it, which I was nervous about since I took 11 days off of work.
I read an interesting study that indicated most Americans don't venture outside the U.S., but I know for you, you've been traveling since you were very young.
I grew up from the age of 8 months old. That's when I started going to China. And ever since I was 8 months old, every 3 to 4 summers, my family would go to China, and we would go for extensive amounts of time. So it would be like 6 weeks, 5 weeks. We take the whole summer and we go to China. So I grew up as, a toddler, as a young 10-year-old teenager, all the way up to me being now a young adult. I grew up seeing other cultures, and it really wasn't until I got to my 20s that I realized I'm seeing things that a lot of my friends aren't seeing, and that a lot of the people in my circles are not being immersed in. I think it's so important to go out and be immersed in other cultures because you see how most of the world operates. I would say, in my opinion, I feel like America is a little bit of an outlier when it comes to the rest of the world. The rest of the world relies so much on public transportation. Not everyone has a car. And it also depends on what city you live in America. If you live in New York, obviously that's very subway system, public transport. DC is like that. Though I would say those are mainly the 2 cities in the US that rely heavily on that. Most other countries, that is their way of transportation. Most other countries, the area of Indonesia we were in was not the most touristy city. Granted, there's still millions of people in the city, but it's just not your Bali. It is a more tight-knit community in a way. So that it's just eye-opening. The food is so different. At least in Asian cultures, people are so warm and welcoming. And we would meet someone and they would immediately ask us to come to their house for dinner, and they were going to cook us dinner that night. It is much more slow-paced, a lot more intentional. Versus I feel like, at least in my American lifestyle, I am go, 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 and I am booking things down to the minute, scheduling out my day because I have so much to squeeze in. Versus over in Indonesia, people run late all the time because you rely on public transportation, but also people are not as wound up. And I admire that. I loved that. Running a little bit late because my conversation with someone lasted 15 minutes longer, and no one's mad about it. No one was mad about it. It's almost what you expect. I loved being immersed in the culture.
Getting back to the preparation, I know that you prayed a lot about it to make sure that it was meant for you to go, but how else did you prepare? Because 11 days is a long time.
It is. For my kind of spiritual side, I read a lot of books leading up to the trip. It was not my first time in Asia, so I kind of knew what to expect culture-wise, though a big aspect of Asian cultures are their religion, and there's a lot of Buddhism, there's a lot of Muslims, a lot of Islam, and so I living in America, growing up in America, I am not crossing paths with Buddhists and Muslims every day. And in Indonesia, you definitely do. Every single day, you go down a street and you would see a mosque, a temple, and a church all right next to each other. And you just don't get that, at least where we live in America. So I read some books on it just to brush up on the religions. And I had taken some courses in college, but that was years ago. So I pulled those books back out and I read them. Travel-wise with the trip, it was 11 days. I started packing about a week before I left. But honestly, I am a type B personality. I am not very schedule oriented. I can very much go with the flow. So honestly, I prayed about it and I just left a lot in the Lord's hands. And I was like, I'm going to do what I can do and I'm going to pack and I'm going to be prepared. And if I hit a bump in the road on the way, then it's okay.
You mentioned religion. Islam is the largest religion in Asia. The second largest is Hinduism, with the third being no religion at all. People just don't claim one faith over another. Where were you specifically? I know Indonesia is about 5 times smaller than the United States, but it's still big. So give us a geographical idea of where you were and why you were there.
We didn't have a ton of planned events. It was just go to parks and meet people and get coffee with them, get tea with them. Our schedule was going to be very relaxed. So that's just how I went in expecting. I knew it was going to be very relaxed and just go with the flow. I was in Indonesia on the island of, I believe, Sumatra. Indonesia is multiple different islands, and it is about a 1-hour flight from Singapore. So the purpose of the trip was absolutely, we're there to be immersed in the culture. We're there sightseeing, to meet people. Also, I was there to just learn more about the religions that are over there. I am a Christian, and I have grown so much in my faith by going to other countries and going to other cultures that don't share my beliefs and hearing people's wonder and awe of Jesus when they truly have never heard it before. And they ask the most childlike questions, but it's so encouraging because you see the wonder on their face because they've never heard it before. And so that's my drive. That's my drive, is to go and share. And I love doing it. And even if I'm meeting with someone and they are a different religion than me, and they get to share about their religion, I love learning about it and I love hearing their stories. And it still encourages my Christian faith because I, in return, get to share with them. Most people here have heard about Jesus and have heard the gospel and have heard because there are churches on nearly every corner. Over there, it's just not the same. There are mosques and temples, and there's just not the same access. So going over there, even if I'm over there for 6 days, if I get to share with one person, it's life-changing for me every time I go. And I can see it's life-changing for them because it kind of gets the gears turning a little bit. I love that. That's my driving force with going overseas and, going to other countries. And I see myself doing it for the rest of my life.
Growing up in Southeast Michigan, I was surrounded by so many different cultures. The Middle Eastern community was pretty large. Also large percentages of Greeks, Chinese, Italian, Japanese, Mexican, Jewish, Belgians too. So I saw mosques, temples, and synagogues in addition to churches. You were having an unbelievable experience in a city known as an economic hub, but also the center of a religion that is much different than that of your own. What challenged you most about that experience?
A lot. A lot. The language, first of all, was a huge roadblock. We were only in Indonesia for 6 days, and you can't learn the language in 6 days. You can hardly even learn greetings in 6 days. So when we're out meeting people, you kind of have to find English speakers. You have to find English speakers. And if someone you're talking to does not speak English, there's no way to communicate. You have a little bit of Google Translate, but that does not go far if you're trying to get to know someone on a deeper level. So language was a big barrier. And what I found in the city that we were in Indonesia, there were not a ton of English speakers. There was one night we did go to an English class and we taught an English lesson with a bunch of Indonesians who were wanting to learn more. And that was an awesome opportunity to meet people because everyone there is speaking English and everyone wants to practice English with the Americans. And they think Americans are so cool and they want to hear about the American lifestyle. So that was a great opportunity. But just walking down the street to the market or going to a park, it's harder to find English speakers. That was the biggest, I would say, challenge. Other than that, just the physical, you get tired. The jet lag, it is a 12-hour difference. So you were literally on the opposite side of the world and your day and night is totally flopped. So I would say the first 4 days, I was exhausted. And you just have to push through because if you take a nap in the middle of the day, that ruins it. So you just got to push through.
I can imagine the recovery time from international travel seems to be worse, especially when you're traveling east and you were literally on the other side of the globe. It can take about a day, I've read, to recover from each time zone that you cross. Any impactful stories or interactions that you can remember once you were able to recover from that jet lag? What were the biggest lessons you learned?
Oh my goodness. I could sit on this for an hour and just go and go and go. So many. Even if it was just a 10-minute conversation with someone, there were so many interactions with people that just made my heart sing. Let me think of two. So there's two people that I met that were the most impactful in the short time that I was there. One woman, we can call her Tanya. I met her. My group of friends were at a park near one of the universities, and while we were there, I met Tanya. She was there with her two kids and they were playing in the grass. And I walked up to her and I got to talking with her. We talked for maybe 5-10 minutes. And one of those instances where she said, come to my house, like I'll cook for you. And I said, oh my goodness, that is so kind. I don't think I'm going to be able to today. What if we meet up tomorrow? And so we were messaging on Instagram. We exchanged Instagrams and we set up a time to meet the next day. And we met at a coffee shop and she brought her two kids and it was just fabulous. We talked for 2 hours. If I lived in Indonesia, she would be one of my best friends. We just clicked and she was very well spoken in English. She is a Muslim woman. So she was covered with her hijab, which is the head covering, long sleeves, pants. And I was asking her about her religion. And it's a very common thing to ask people over there. People are very open about talking about it because it's how they dress. It's the hijab. It's what they eat. It's very much a part of their life. So I was asking her about her religion and she said she grew up Muslim. She was raised Muslim. And she said her husband is also Muslim. They're raising their kids in the religion. And she was just telling me about her life, about her kids. She went through a struggle a couple years ago where she lost a child and she was just opening up so much about it. I was just listening to her and you could see just in her emotions and on her face, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to hear her life and her struggles and her testimony, really. So after she shared about her religion, she asked me about mine. She said, "You're American. I assume you're Christian." And I said, yes, I am Christian. I attend church and I read my Bible and I pray every day. It is who I am. And I got to share with her what I believe, all the way from Adam and Eve, from creation to, Jesus's birth, to Jesus's crucifixion, his resurrection, and Jesus is coming back. So there were many really cool things about this because up until we got to this point in the conversation, we'd already been hanging out for about an hour, and her kids were very, very energetic. They were running around. It was kind of hard to talk because the coffee house was also really loud. But when I got to a conversation about my religion and Christianity, they calmed down immediately. And it was a really cool experience because I noticed it. And as soon as we got to the deeper conversation, everything just kind of sat still, and they were sitting and they were coloring and everything had calmed down. After I'd shared with her, I asked her, I said, Tanya, have you heard this before? Has anyone ever shared with you before? And she said, yes, she has Christian friends, and they have told her the same stories I told her about Adam and Eve, and they've told her about Jesus. And the conversation kind of ended with, you believe what you believe, and I believe what I believe, which is a normal response, especially since she is more devout in her faith. She had the hijab on, dressed appropriately, the long sleeves, the pants. When you were dressed outwardly as a Muslim, you are more, what I would say, devout compared to some Muslim women don't cover. And that's, just their level of spirituality, how devout they are in their faith. Tanya was covered. She is more devout in her faith. So she was very kind and very, smiling, and loved hearing what I had to say, though it did end with, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe. And I was like, that's totally okay. And we moved on in the conversation. We started talking about music and movies and books, and she loves Mariah Carey, and we talked about Mariah Carey. So fun topics. We talked about those, and we were talking about movies. And I asked her, I said, what's your favorite movie ever? Indonesian or English? What's your favorite movie? She said her favorite movie she watches in English is the Jesus movie from the 70s.
I have not seen the Jesus movie, but I have seen The Passion of the Christ, and both films depict the life of Jesus based on the New Testament. While The Passion follows the last 12 hours of his life, the Jesus movie spans from birth to death.
It just ignited my faith because I see God working so much in her life. And I just met her that week, and she's already had her closer friends share with her. She's already watching the movie, and then God, intercedes our paths. And I'm not the first person that she's heard it from. She's heard it from multiple people. She's watched the movie. And I just see how God is working, and I'm like, God, thank you. I'm so glad I met her. And it was just really encouraging to hear that. And I'm praying for her. My personal belief is the most important thing you can know about a person is their salvation, because this life is so temporary. It is fleeting, and it goes by so fast. And this world is broken. We see it every day, Lenise, on the news. It is a broken, broken world. So there has to be hope. There has to be something to look forward to. And my hope is one day I know I am going to see Jesus face to face. And I know one day I'm going to hug him, and I will have eternal life with him in heaven. And I want that for all of my closest friends. I want that for my coworkers. I want that for my family. And that's the most important thing, because this life is gone in the blink of an eye. What matters is eternity. And I may never see her again in this lifetime, but I pray I see her in heaven, because that's eternity. And that's where I know I'm going. And I pray that the Lord softens her heart and softens her to believing in Jesus, because I want to see her again. There was another interaction I had with someone else that also just totally blew my mind. I was in Singapore for this one. So for the trip, we flew into Singapore, had a day in Singapore, flew out to Indonesia, had 6 days there, and then flew back to Singapore. So this instance was about halfway through our trip. This was day 9, and I'm in Singapore with my friends, and I am wearing out physically. My body is feeling so weak. I'm coughing. I have a headache. I'm just feeling really sicky. And I was so mad at myself because we had a full day planned and I am so sick. I could not make it through the day. So I told my friends, I was like, I've got to go back to the hotel. I am so sorry. I was flying out to China the next day. So I was like, I have got to rest. And I hate that I'm doing this because I'm in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but I physically can't right now. So my friends called me a taxi and I get in the taxi and they send me off to the hotel. It's about a 15-minute drive. As I'm in the taxi, I'm talking to my taxi driver. And we'll call him Jamie. I'm talking with Jamie and he's asking me, obviously he hears I have an American accent. He's like, oh, where are you from in America? And I tell him Alabama and nobody knows where Alabama is. They know Florida and they know California. So I was like, oh, Florida, it's right above Florida. So talking to him and we got to a religious conversation and I just point blank asked him, I was like, Jamie, like, what's your religion? Like, what do you believe in? And he said, oh, like, I don't really believe in a lot. I believe in time. Time is his God. And I asked him and I said, how is that working out for you? And he said, it's troublesome. And he turned the conversation back to me. He said, you're American. He said the same thing. He said, you're American. I assume you're Christian. And I said, yes, I am Christian. I am a strong Christian. I read my Bible. I pray. And I told him my hope and my trust is in Jesus and I have a personal relationship with him. And Jamie looked at me and he kind of like turned around and he said, what does that mean to have a personal relationship? How do you know God's voice? So I kind of turned it back on him and I said, Jamie, like, are you a father? And he said, yes, I have 2 grown adult kids. And I said, do they know the sound of your voice? And he said, of course they do. And I said, how do they know the sound of your voice? And he said, I raised them. They talk to me every day. I see them. And I said, it's the same way with God. I know God's voice because I talk to him every day. And God hears my voice because I am sitting on my bed at night and I'm talking to him about my day and I'm praying through things. I'm praying through my struggles. And it's a relationship, the same as I would have a relationship with my best friend or the same as I would have a relationship with my dad, my earthly dad. It's getting to know someone. It's reading. We have a whole book about God and it's reading it. And it's learning about centuries and centuries of things that happened way before I was born. And it's learning, just like my earthly dad had a life way before I was born. But I talk to him and I get to know him and I learn about him. Same as with my God in heaven. And after I said that to Jamie, he said, huh. And then kind of changed the subject afterwards, which I have also found to be also a common response because when you hear the good news, it does stir something in people, and sometimes it makes people uncomfortable, and that is okay. That's totally okay. It's not me making someone uncomfortable. It's them hearing something that they've never heard before, and maybe it stirred something in him. I hope it did stir something in him.
And in listening to you, it is clear just how inspired you were by this trip. How would you say it affected you overall, and how has it changed your perspective or your approach to reporting going forward?
Every time I go overseas, it changes my life. It humbles me. It reminds me of how blessed I am to live in America. I came back to work. When I came back to work that first day, I was energized. And I was so energized. Maybe that's the physical rest of just not being in the news world for 2 weeks, or maybe that was the spiritual rest. It's probably both. But it reminded me, I love people. I love people. And it's grown because of my job, but that's just innately what I love. I just love hearing people's stories, even if I wasn't a reporter. And everyone has a story. You just have to have the time to sit and listen to it. For example, yesterday, I was on a story and it was a neighborhood issue. And I was talking to some of the people who had reached out to us, trying to get help. And I stood there and I was talking to them, and I talked to them for maybe 10 or 15 minutes after the interview. And I remember thinking, half of me was like, oh my gosh, I've got to leave. I've got to start writing. I've got to edit. This has got to make the newscast. I've got to go. The other half of me was sit still. I am reporting on an issue that is very important to these people. Whether or not it's important to me, it is important to them. And I stood there for only 10 more minutes. And in the grand scheme of my day, I have 10 minutes to stand and talk to someone. And it just kind of zapped me back for a second because it reminded me I am go, go, go when other people are not. And that's okay. And I need to learn to not be frustrated by it and to sit and listen.
I can so relate to loving people and understanding everyone has a story and is worthy of being heard.
Every day, as a news reporter, I am serving others. I am being the voice for people who don't get to be on TV, who don't have the media contacts. So I am advocating for people. I'm advocating for them. I'm fighting for them. I'm sharing their stories. I'm sharing their words. And I'm serving. That's my capacity of serving them. That's my way of helping them when they have neighborhood issues that, they've been beating the bushes and they can't get anything done. So they reach out to us and I get to be the one to fight for them. And there's something about being intentional and also not seeing them as just a story, but seeing them as a person. They are a person who took time out of their day to talk to me too. It's not just me taking time out of my 8-hour schedule. They are talking to me after they're done with work and they're exhausted and they probably want to go home too, but they want to talk to me for 15 minutes because it's important to them. So it should be important to me too.
Looking back, what advice would you give other people considering going overseas, and how has this experience affected your faith?
If it is already in your mind, in your spirit, in your heart to go somewhere, the answer is yes. The answer is go. I had a mentor in college and she gave me some of the best advice, but she said, if you feel a stirring to go somewhere, go overseas, go to a different culture, to share your faith, to, learn more about a culture, be encouraged in your faith, pray about it. Of course, pray about it, but don't pray expecting God to talk you out of it. Pray and already take the answer as yes, and pray that the Lord is going to open those doors. Don't pray for him to close it. Pray for him to do what he does and just trust, and he will open the rest of the doors. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, the finances. I can't just write a check for this and be donezo with it. I was stressed about paying for this trip. When it comes to taking the time off, it worried me. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take 11 days off of work. That's a lot of time to be off. But I trusted. And I was like, if God wants me to go, I'm not going to worry about it. And God's going to make it happen. So I would say if you're thinking about it, do it. And your prayer, I would advise it to be pray that God is going to open those doors. So be obedient and trust, and he will take care of the rest.
Thank you, Lacey, for speaking with me.
I had the best time, Lenise, and even talking through the trip, it's helping me remember a lot that I may have forgotten. So thank you for allowing me to share about my trip. It was incredible, and I wish I could sit down and have this one-on-one conversation with all my coworkers because everyone's asked me how my trip was, but it's hard to say everything in a 30-second conversation. So thank you for allowing me to share it.
Living It Up with Lenise has been a production of Fox 10 Podcasts and myself, Lenise Lagan. The executive producer of this episode is myself, with the music by Kendall Faust. A special thanks to Lacey for this interview. You can see the pictures from her journey on Facebook and Instagram at Lacey Beasley. Remember to share this podcast and leave a review if you enjoyed it. Your support means so very much. Thank you for joining us on this journey of stepping outside your comfort zone and exploring new cultures. Until next time.